Yeah.
Okay. We have our final presentation of the afternoon. This is Dr. Carr's group.
So, hi everyone, good afternoon. Thanks for being here and thanks for sticking it out to the last presentation. We're super excited to share with you our senior thesis research on the addiction-like behavior in female rats following cocaine self-administration. My name is Sadie Saunders.
I'm Della. I'm Millie.
I'm Addison. And I'm Millie.
And we would just like to take this brief moment to thank Dr. Carr for being a wonderful faculty mentor this semester and allowing us the opportunity to take part in her research. So for a little bit of background, drug addiction is defined as a chronic relapsing disorder characterized by compulsive drug-seeking behaviors despite the potential for very adversive consequences. Drug addiction research has found that women are more likely to transition from casual drug use into developing severe addictions much more frequently and much more rapidly than males. For cocaine specifically, it has been found that periods of cocaine abstinence are shorter in women compared to men, and likewise, women have reported higher cravings of cocaine compared to males. These behaviors seen in women, as well as a demonstration of other drug addiction symptomatology, is known as a telescoping effect, which has devastating implications such that women have minimized opportunities to seek treatment and medical interventions as a result of these addictions. The telescoping effect has also been demonstrated in female rats. Animal models are useful to implement addiction research as it allows for the generation of studies, data, and hopefully one-day treatments for addiction that can one day be translated to humans. The development of addiction-like behavior is largely influenced by the conditions of self-administration. These are two of the current models of drug self-administration in animal research. You'll notice both models are intermittent access, which means that it more closely models the human condition of sporadic drug use. The intermittent access unlimited model on the left demonstrates that during the drug available period, animals can earn an infinite number of infusions, which is then followed by a 25-minute drug unavailable period, and then the cycle repeats. Comparatively, the intermittent access limited model is when the drug available period also lasts for 5 minutes, but this time the animal can only earn up to 3 infusions. As mentioned before, there are vast sex differences in how addiction progresses and its severity in each. Historically, however, in animal research, female rats have been excluded in addiction studies specifically because of a belief that their behavior was much more variable than males.
3 key articles led to the development of our study. First, Caldwell and Robinson looked at an intermittent access unlimited procedure in both male and female rats. The graph to the right references alpha, which is essentially an inverse measure of motivation. In other words, when alpha decreases, that means incentive sensitization has occurred. As you can see in the graph from Caldwell and Robinson, between the baseline and the first 10-day marker of intermittent access, there's a significant drop in the alpha value, which of course we know means incentive sensitization occurred. And the main finding of this study was that female rats were more motivated than male rats following these procedures. A second unpublished study by Dr. Carr looked at intermittent access limited procedures in females versus male rats to prevent any potential sex differences in consumption. However, this study found that once rats' cocaine intake was limited, there was no longer a sex difference in motivation. This leads to our third study by Lane, which compared the intermittent access unlimited and limited procedures in male rats. However, this study found that between the 2 different types of procedures, there was not a significant difference between motivation levels. Our study essentially replicates the experimental design within the Lane study. However, we of course used female rats, and we'll get into more of our experimental design in a minute. The incubation of cocaine craving reflects relapse behaviors, which are very prevalent in human addiction. Nicholas and colleagues looked at the incubation of cocaine craving in female and male rats who underwent intermittent access procedures. Following these procedures, the rats went into a period of abstinence, where throughout this period they were presented with the associated cues of receiving the drug, such as extended levers and the cue lights. However, when they made an attempt to self-administer the drug, they were not able to do so. Incubation is exhibited when there is a higher drug-seeking effort at the end of the abstinence period compared to the beginning. In the Nicholas study, drug-seeking behavior was reflected through the number of lever presses that the rats made during an experimental period. As you can see in the graph, on day 29 of abstinence, there were far more lever presses or drug-seeking behaviors than on day 2 of abstinence. Therefore, this study exhibits the incubation of cocaine craving. However, when Nicholas and colleagues aimed to recreate the results of this study, they were unable to do so. And when looking into some of the potential reasons why this occurred, they learned of the importance of the estrus cycle. More specifically, they found that in female rats, drug seeking was far more pronounced during their female estrus cycle. And this finding kind of hints at why, or highlights why, females have been historically excluded from research because their behavior is thought to be too variable due to their changing hormones throughout their cycles. To reiterate, incentive sensitization is indicative of increased motivation. And since alpha is an inverse measurement, in order to see incentive sensitization, there must be a decrease between the baseline threshold and the probe threshold. With that being said, we hypothesized that the intermittent access unlimited group of rats would show greater motivation compared to the limited group of rats. In addition, referring back to our last slide on the incubation of cocaine craving, we also hypothesized that the unlimited group would show more drug seeking and relapse behaviors compared to rats in the limited group.
So the first step of our experimental timeline was acquisition. During acquisition, rats got to learn around our testing box. So here we have our testing box. In each box, there's a correct and an incorrect lever. When rats pressed the correct lever, the Q light above would illuminate, and they would receive an infusion from the infusion pump. Here we have our result. On the x-axis, we have infusion criteria, and on the y-axis, session length and inactive lever presses. Infusion criteria refers to the two different types of programs rats completed. During acquisition, after 10 infusions, the program would end. Then, later on, after 20 infusions, the program would end. This allowed us to control for the total amount of drugs that the rats were consuming before dividing into groups. Since there's no significant differences, this shows that, as expected, before dividing, there was no difference. They equally learned the association between lever pressing and drug reward. Our second step was baseline threshold. During this, rats completed 110-minute sessions of decreasing drug dosages of cocaine. This follows the standard demand curve as found in a previous study by Carr and Robinson. We used 3 primary measurements to analyze threshold data: Q0, which is the Q0, Pmax, and alpha. Q0 refers to the preferred level of consumption when the price is nil, Pmax, the price at which maximal responding occurs, and alpha, which is the elasticity of the demand curve. As previously stated, alpha is an inverse relationship with motivation, so lower alpha means higher motivation. Here are our results. On the x-axis, we have our 2 groups, limited and unlimited. And on the y-axis, we have alpha, Pmax, and Q0. We found no significant differences, which again was expected, and that shows that before dividing into our limited and unlimited groups, there was no difference in motivation levels in rats.
So the next step in our study was intermittent access. The rats were counterbalanced into one of the 2 groups based on their alpha variance during the last 3 days of baseline threshold and their weight. So as stated previously, the intermittent access limited group were given the drug available 5-minute period or 3 infusions, followed by the 25-minute drug unavailable period, while the unlimited group were given an infinite amount of infusions for 5 minutes during their drug available period, immediately followed by the 25-minute drug unavailable period, which continued for 8 cycles. As we expected, the intermittent access unlimited group had a significantly higher total consumption than the limited group because of their infinite access to infusions. The next step in our study was probe threshold. Probe threshold was a replication of baseline threshold, so the 110-minute sessions with the dose decreasing every 10 minutes. Unfortunately, we did not support our hypothesis because we did not find any significant results. However, as you can see, the alpha for the unlimited group is lower than the limited group. This is what we expected because they had a higher rate of consumption in the previous step.
So for Q reinstatement, unfortunately our results did not significantly support our hypothesis, and again, Q reinstatement is a test for incubation of cocaine craving or a propensity to relapse after 1 and 31 days of abstinence. So we loaded the rats into the chamber with the same procedure we would as if they were going to be receiving cocaine. So we flushed and tethered their catheters. However, active lever presses did not result in an infusion of cocaine. So looking at our results, the significant result shows that the limited group made significantly more responses on withdrawal day 31 compared to withdrawal day 1. And this is supported by previous literature that shows incubation of cocaine craving or drug-seeking behaviors increase as abstinence increases. But in terms of our hypothesis, the unlimited group did make more lever presses compared to the limited group on both withdrawal day 1 and withdrawal day 31, meaning they had more incubation of cocaine craving or propensity to relapse, but this was not significant because of our lack of an N value. But even though it's not significant, it is still a unique and novel finding because there's been no previous research on the incubation of cocaine craving in the intermittent access limited group before.
So in summary, unfortunately, like Della stated, our hypothesis was not supported. However, our results were able to generate a novel finding in that the rats in the intermittent access limited group demonstrated incubation of cocaine craving. Collectively, we lost too many rats throughout the duration of our experiment to be able to generate more significant results or accurate conclusions. But with little significance, we did find some of our data was trending in the right direction, as previously mentioned, that being Q reinstatement and alpha pro.
So for limitations, our biggest issue was a lack of N value because of lost subjects. So even before the experiment began, our rats had low weight, and even though they gained weight before the surgery, this still could have had an influence on their behavior and eventual loss of subjects. We know from Dr. Carr's previous experience and speaking to her colleagues that female rats often clot more often than male rats do, but unfortunately there's little to no research done on why this happens. And then we did not monitor the rat's estrus cycle, which we know from previous literature has an influence on drug-seeking behaviors. However, this is a time-consuming and invasive procedure that simply did not fit into our timeline. And then for future research, we think a recreation of this exact experimental protocol would be beneficial as no previous research has looked at these specific variables before. And the goal of this should be to increase N value and decrease subject loss. So right now we use the P1 technology for catheters. However, a researcher is working to optimize this catheter technology. So the one that we use is a metal tube that's surgically inserted into the right jugular vein. But this new optimized catheter is more flexible and it has channels and passages that are supposed to decrease coagulation and clotting. And when they did this, they tested it in experiments. It actually increased the success rate of the catheters throughout the whole experiment from 46% to 93%, which is a big increase. And then we also found that if you house pairs of animals together, but with a clear, thin barrier in between each animal, their cortisol level decreased, and in turn, coagulation actually decreased. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
All right, questions for our final presenters?
We started with 24, and the N number was 9 or 10.
I think it was 5 and 6. I think.
So it sounds like with the catheterization question, it's a question of if the dosage is actually going into the rat, is that right?
Yeah, so when they get clots in their catheters, the infusion can't get in, so they can't get it. And if we were to try and force it, it would not.
Is there any observable effect that you can see to know if they?
We do a test to test their catheters, which we administer a tiny bit of medication that makes them go ataxic. And if they go ataxic, then that's confirmation that their catheter worked. Unfortunately, a large number of our rats, after testing their catheters, they didn't fall asleep, so we had to exclude them from the rest of our study because we weren't sure if they even received cocaine or not.
They'll cringe sometimes because they can feel the weight coming out. No.